Welcome to Gambling with an Edge with your hosts Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin. Bob Dancer is America's premier video poker writer and teacher. He's written 10 books, including Video Poker for the Intelligent Beginner and the best-selling $1 Million Video Poker. He helped develop the computer software Video Poker for Winners, and in 2004 he was inducted into the Video Poker Hall of Fame. Richard Munchkin has been a professional advantage player for over 30 years and is in the Blackjack Hall of Fame. His book, Gambling Wizards, Conversations with the World's Greatest Gamblers, is a testament to the many ways you can succeed at gambling. The goal of the show is that you'll be a more knowledgeable gambler tomorrow than you were yesterday. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good evening. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Our guest today is Phillip Reed, a professional author and a novice-level blackjack player who found a blackjack mentor and toured the United States playing blackjack. His brand new book, Wild Cards, recounts this journey, and we'll be talking to Phil in a few minutes. This show is being pre-taped and will probably be aired on December 1st. While this is being aired, Bonnie and I will be on a 15-day cruise between Long Beach, California and Hawaii, including 5 days of island hopping. We've both very much been looking forward to this and at the same time quite concerned that this is an El Nino year. Things could get a bit rough. It's a pretty big ship, but when you compare it to a Pacific Ocean and stormy weather, it's really tiny. Still, armed with Dramamine and a reasonably strong conviction that these ship captains really know what they're doing, we'll be leaving for our venture right after Thanksgiving. Wish us luck. All right.
You know, we took a cruise to Alaska one time and hit some bad weather, and half the people on the ship were suffering.
I've been at a tail end of a hurricane, and they went out of their way, and just the tail end still was bad news.
Yeah.
The ship held together fine, but it wasn't fun. Anyway, let's talk to our guest. Phillip Reed is an author who has written both fiction and nonfiction. He's written books and screenplays. His current job is as an editor of Edmunds.com and to talk on a radio about cars. Phillip Reed, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
It's good to be with you guys.
So I just have to say right at the outset that I wrote a play that Phillip reviewed 31 years ago, and so it was. I'm happy to say that the review was good, so we're allowing him to stay for this hour.
And I actually remember it. I don't remember his performance. I didn't know he was an actor, but I do remember the play. And maybe that puts something in my mind about writing a book about blackjack.
Maybe. Although the play was about a guy who actually was a cheat as opposed to a legitimate advantage player, but
right.
But there you go. So small worlds.
Your newest book, called Wild Cards, is about a year in your life when you went from raw beginner to someone taking a long road trip playing blackjack all along the way. Why don't you take about 5 minutes and tell us about the book, and then Richard and I will have some questions for you.
Well, I wanted to start by saying that this is the official release day of Wild Cards. It goes on sale at Amazon.com. And so I'm really thrilled to be here with you guys on this great radio show. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, yeah. And congratulations.
Flattery will get you a second invitation. So
right, I'm just trying to soften you up. So, anyway, I want to tell you a little bit about how the book came to be. I've written a number of novels. I like to write thrillers. And I was contemplating writing a thriller called The Fraud Triangle about a CFO of a company who's investing a fraud in his own company. So he's a kind of a button-down corporate kind of a guy, but during the weekends he goes to Las Vegas and he's a card counter. Well, I didn't know anything about card counting or blackjack, so I thought I'd have to do some research. Well, as serendipity would have it, a few weeks later a professional golfer friend of mine came to visit. He had just been in Las Vegas giving a golf lesson to a professional blackjack player. And the golfer brought to me the official manual of the MIT blackjack team. And this golfer, his name is Jacob Bowden. He's a specialist in swing speed training. And he said, you got to write a book about this guy. So the manual sat on my desk for a couple of weeks. And one night I didn't have anything to read, so I picked it up and I started reading it. And it was funny because I started reading it, and it's a very good manual, very good basic manual, and something just kind of clicked. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Could you really do this, you know? So I started learning basic strategy, and a little while later I wound up going on a cruise with my father, and they had a casino on board. And I played just using basic strategy, and the worst thing happened. I won some money.
Right.
And, of course, the thought was, can it really be this easy, you know? And, of course, it's not. But when I got back, I got Bill's number. Bill Palis is his alias. And I gave him a call, and he wasn't at all what I expected. Very understated guy, very almost like a businessman, you know. I expected sort of somebody like Rhett Butler, you know, very flamboyant, you know, storyteller kind of guy. But he was very straightforward. And we kind of hit it off, so we decided we would meet in Las Vegas and kind of give it a trial run.
Was your original plan to write the book about him, or did you kind of plan, or your original plan was to write the novel? But
yes.
But when you decided to write about the card counting, were you going to write about him, or?
I think it was because, you know, I had no intention at that point of actually learning to count cards myself. I thought I can handle basic strategy, but counting cards sounds way out there, you know. So I called him and we got together, and I did sort of think about writing the book about him, but, you know, it's kind of a fishing expedition when you're starting to write a nonfiction book, because you just have to kind of see what you've got and where it goes. You know, so I got into it, you know, step by step. So I met him in Las Vegas, and the first thing that happened was I saw him win like $1,600 in a 20-minute session. But it was pretty dramatic because he went down like, you know, $1,000, then came roaring back and, you know, and cashed out with a $1,600 win. And it was like, you know, I'm not sure what I just saw, but it was pretty impressive. So we started working on the book. And a short time after that, I took a sabbatical from my job at Edmunds, 4 months. And I decided to go to Argentina to visit my son. He's a graduate student there. And I decided, you know, I'm turning 60 years old. I got to keep my brain in shape. So I'm going to study Spanish, and I'm going to learn to count cards. So I was down there, and I played in a couple of casinos, one in Buenos Aires and one in Bariloche, a nice little casino up in the mountains. And by the time I got back to the U.S., it was like, you know, this is a lot of fun. I'm going to really push forward, but how am I going to make the book kind of fresh and original, you know? Well, I had read Blackjack Autumn. That's a pretty good book.
That is a good book.
We've
had Barry on the show talking about it.
Yeah, I thought that's a lot of fun. And, you know, of course, I think he's a stand-up comedian or something, so he's had a lot of good one-liners, isn't he?
No.
Well, he got off some pretty good one-liners in the book. And I just thought, you know, with that in mind, I thought, well, I'm going to hit every casino on the way to the East Coast where my dad lives and back.
That's a lot of casinos.
Yeah, and more all the time, too. I mean, they're really growing, popping up everywhere.
I think there's 1,500 casinos in the U.S.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Like Iowa's got casinos now.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
They've had them for a long time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you never quite know. And, of course, Illinois has got a bunch of them. And I hit some of the big spots. You know, I went to Foxwoods. I really wanted to go to Foxwoods.
But you didn't play Vegas.
Well, I had played it already, and I was going to play it again soon. I figured that was pretty... I did go to Wendover.
Yeah.
That was actually a pretty nice part of the book. I mean, it was one of those days where everything worked, you know. And had a big win, and it kind of sustained me for the rest of the trip. So I kept driving and kind of trying to put the book together. But when I was in the Midwest, I met with Bill. Bill's got a really good friend who's the priest of his diocese, and his name is Father Andy. That's his alias. And he likes to invest in Bill, and he started to invest in Bill and me. And we would play. We would pool our money and play. And we traveled together and played together over the course of about a year. And we played Tunica, we played Biloxi, and we played Vegas a number of times. So that was sort of the core of the book. And but another piece of the book, I don't know whether you guys know Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote The Tipping Point.
Sure.
He's got this kind of way of taking, you know, subjects and making everything so interesting. And so you're learning and you're entertained and everything. And I kind of wanted to do that with the Blackjack book. Like tell a personal story, but also tell a kind of a deeper story, too. So since we've got the priest involved, you know, now we've got theological overtones. But one of my personal story is that I was a horrible student. I was never good at math. So I'm the worst person to kind of undertake, you know, what you would think is a highly mathematical project.
I think the outsiders think it's highly mathematical. Once you get into it, you realize it really isn't.
No, but so I mean, my take on it is, you know this better than I do, but the math has already been done. It's been done for a long time. It's done by computers. If you want to, you can go and do it again. But
Right.
really, even the name card counting is a misnomer. It's tracking. You know, you're really just basically tracking. And if you use the high-low, of course, you need to do a little bit of division. But you know, but that's about it for math. So, but this type of thing I'm not very good at. In the course of the book, I actually went to a psychiatrist and was diagnosed with adult ADD. And it made me kind of review my entire life in terms of being a poor student, not being able to tackle certain subjects, and so on. And kind of the conclusion of all of that was, I can learn, but I learn a lot slower than a lot of people. And I learn in different ways, too. I don't learn in an abstract way. Like if I'm talking to somebody about cards, I want to actually see cards so that I can really visualize and process, because that's how you play when you're at the table, is you're seeing everything. So it was a way for me to really evaluate what was going on, you know, in my own brain. And I think I learned an awful lot about learning in it. And I hope that I wrote a book that's both entertaining but useful to particularly beginning people that are interested in card counting, interested in blackjack, want to get a little bit better, and they wonder what the life is like. You know, that what does it feel like to go into like a Tunica or a Biloxi and spend 3 days and go up and down and up and down, you know, that kind of thing. And I think, too, I hope people find it funny, you know. I mean, there's a lot of kind of crazy stuff that happens in a casino, let's face it.
Yeah.
Yes, our listeners know quite a bit about those kind of things. Now, in the book, you mentioned several times that this adventure put a strain on your marriage.
Yes.
Are you still married, and are you still playing blackjack?
Well, I just talked to my wife about 15 minutes ago, so I think we're still together.
Good.
That's the latest. When I come home tomorrow, maybe it'll be different. But my wife comes from a very conservative background. That said, she came from a Southern background. Her father was one of 7 boys, and he'd go into the woods across the street and drink moonshine. And every once in a while, he would disappear and spend 4 or 5 days at the horse track. So when the whole concept of going to Las Vegas with family money came up, she was not a big fan of it. But time passed, and we didn't mortgage the house. And, didn't seem to be any dent in the in the savings account, so she accepted it. She's hoping that now that the book is published and my name is out there, I won't be able to play. So
she hopes you'll be recognized and barred everywhere. Is that it?
And I said, look, I'm small potatoes. I'm not sure that that's going to happen.
Yeah,
But,
Yeah, in the book, you do not present yourself as someone the casino should fear.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now, Bill Palis is you present him in the book as a very accomplished former MIT team member. So he was your mentor, and having a mentor is very good. But then he would share bankroll with you, and you would both play on a common bankroll when he knew he was 3 times the player you were. And so why, and you were possibly had a small edge, maybe not. It's unclear.
And in the beginning, it seemed like you were still making basic strategy errors, and so
why would he do this?
Yeah,
why would he dilute his bankroll, carrying along a novice?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, a really fair question, too. First of all, it wasn't a 50-50 split. So he did take more than I did. I think that he felt, also, I'm writing the book, and that's something that, he really wanted to get done. Because I think that, when you're good at something, you want recognition, even if it's going to be sort of anonymous. So, and then there were times, as things went on, when, how the swings are sometimes. I mean, he would because he played at a higher level. He almost always played 2 hands, so he played at higher stakes, and so his ups and downs were very very severe. And sometimes me plodding along, with a small edge. I had a few wins that sometimes really contributed quite well. But to some degree, I think it was the generosity and the endorsement of the project that he wanted. I mean, he's been to Vegas quite a bit, and he thought it was a lot more fun to have a trio rather than just him and Father Andy.
Yeah, I was going to say he was also splitting money with Father Andy, who wasn't a player at all. I mean, Father Andy was off playing video poker, right? Probably not, optimally.
I don't know. In the book, he always wins.
Yeah. Well, he has God on his side.
That's because you read your book, Bob.
I don't know. I certainly don't know how to win every time I play video poker. Good. Now, you started off with the KO system.
Yep.
Knockout, which is powerful yet simplified. Less powerful than others, but still pretty good. Bill tried to get you into a more advanced one.
Right.
Before you really even had KO mastered. And then apparently decided you were doing real good with the high-low, so better send you back to KO.
I have to say, when I got to that part of the book that Bill wanted you to move up to Zen, I was like, what? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Because it was pretty clear you really were not, completely 100% with the KO at that point.
You read between the lines and you read accurately. It was. I think he expected me to come along faster. I mean, and I think that there's an element where when you know something really well, it's so clear to you that you can't believe that other people can't pick it up quickly. So I think that there was a little bit of that. Also, I think a good teacher is always challenging you. Now, he didn't. I mean, he did talk about the Zen. We had a big conversation about that in his basement, and he was saying, "Oh, this is great, and it's not that hard," But I did use the high up one, with the ace side count, which is kind of a handful too.
Yeah,
actually.
I wouldn't have done that either. I would have kept you on the KO and
yeah. And the other thing to explain this, Bob, a little bit was we were kind of bouncing around because, Bill really felt that for a single deck, high up one was really good because you had the ace side count, and the high low was particularly good for the 6-deck game because you really and then but then after we were into it for a while, he said, "Look, let's focus on 2-deck games and let's just do the knockout and stick with that, and you got to be confident with it." And I think that the 2-deck game is a really good compromise because if you do lose the count, it's not that far to the end of the reshuffle, and you start again. Plus, you can get a high count after a couple of hands.
Right. How much time were you actually spending studying? And were there big gaps in between your trips so that?
Yeah, there were some pretty big gaps. I mean, at least a month or two in some cases.
You can forget a lot in a month.
Yeah, there's that. Plus, the difficulty of learning blackjack is not spending a lot of time at the table. I mean, if I could come every day and play a little bit and under casino conditions, I think I would have moved along a lot faster. But, like, for example, I'm home, I'm doing my full-time job and everything else, I'm practicing on the side, and then you hit Las Vegas, and you've got to play for like 4 or 5 sessions to find out what you've got, to really see how you're processing it. And so there was always a huge startup. So we'd try to come to Las Vegas for 3 days. The first day was a mess. The second day was pretty good. And then the third day was usually, we were digging out, or I was digging out anyways, so that I could go back home. But yeah, I mean, it was, there were long gaps, and that was difficult.
I have to say, one of the objections I had was this whole concept of having to have confidence. I mean, it may look good to the pit to have confidence, but he seemed to imply that if you weren't confident, you couldn't win. And the cards don't know whether you're confident or not. The right play is the right play,
sure.
regardless of your attitude. So
yeah, not only that, but if you look too smooth, too confident, they immediately start watching you. So I felt I was in pretty good shape, fumbling with my chips, and I never spilled a drink, but
But do you know what I'm talking about? That section of the book where he's saying,
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about now, and I think in there I say there are a lot of intangibles, and I think that what Bill said at that point was he said it's good to have positive thoughts in life. And that certainly is kind of an intangible, too. It's sort of like karma. Does karma really exist? Well, over time, maybe it does. And who can ever prove it does or it doesn't? I play a lot of tennis, and I do know that being confident when you're playing tennis, like to have bad body language is bad for you and for it sends a signal to your opponent. So, I think that you need to feel confident, but you don't need to be, Mr. sort of player at the table kind of thing.
I think you may be happier as a person if you're going in confident, but I don't think it'll affect at all whether you win or lose. Yeah. I mean, if you play competently.
Right. No, Richard,
it may affect your stopping point if you are so disgusted on a losing streak or something, and your confidence is totally blown.
That's true.
You may lose sight of standard deviation and normal swings, and just get screw it, and take other actions.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. I think confidence can help you process information faster and more accurately. I mean, anytime I think that you're relaxed, because if you're confident you're going to be relaxed, things will flow faster. Because actually I read some books on memory, and they said that anytime you're under stress or pressure, your memory decreases. And one of the books that I wrote was actually a book about free throw shooting, performance under pressure, right? That's kind of the ultimate test. The world's champion free throw shooter lives in Long Beach, and we wrote a book together. And he said if you want to shoot 85% in a game, which is pretty good for a free throw shooter, like Magic Johnson used to shoot 85, you should shoot 95 in practice, because there's going to be a drop-off from once you get under pressure. And I think that for me, going to the tables was very much like that. There was a drop-off because there were so many things to process. And I mean, not only were there all the expected things, but then there were all the unexpected things. People jumping in and out of the game, asking you questions, all those things. And I really had to feel I had to be confident, and I had to have it automatic.
Yeah, I agree that it needs to be automatic. You need to be able to.
But one of the interesting things that I found was that there are a lot of books about card counting, but there's not a lot of books about how to learn it, Like the world's greatest blackjack book. It's a pretty good book.
It's kind of overtitled, though.
Yeah, because mine came out now.
Right.
But in that
book,
that
actually wasn't where I was going, but okay.
Yeah. Well, you see, I'm thinking positively.
Yeah, right.
But in that book they talk about counting down a deck. That's one of the big exercises, and various different ways to keep the count. But I felt that there was a big gap in between. Here are all the numbers and what they stand for. Now go out and do it in a casino.
Actually, I don't know if you know who Tommy Highland is, but okay. So I interviewed Tommy for my book, and in it, he had the exact same problem when he first started. He understood what you were supposed to do, but he couldn't figure out how to do it. And when he first started, he played with a friend, and one of them would count all the positive cards, and the other would count all the negative cards, and then they would, compare notes.
Right.
But you're right, there aren't any books that talk about the way I teach people is you wait for the second card of each hand to come out, so you're looking at the hands in pairs and canceling them out.
Actually, that was a big breakthrough for me, too, was Bill came to my house, and we were going to go to some of the Indian casinos down in Southern California, and so we started playing some hands, and he said, don't count them until they're out on the table, because then, you're just going to cancel most of them.
Right.
And then from there on in, you have to count. But, and that was somehow a big breakthrough. It was like, here's where you look as the cards come out. And it really helped me enormously.
Yeah, it seems so obvious once you know it, but for many people that is and actually when I first started playing, I started playing on single and double deck where it was all dealt face down. Mm-hmm. And when I first tried to play face up shoes, it totally threw me off because I was used to, it was really kind of slow because they would turn over the people's hands and reveal them two at a time.
Yeah. Right.
And then trying to keep up with a dealer who was dealing all the hands face up when I first started playing was really tough in the beginning.
How did you learn, or what count did you use first?
When I first started, I learned the high-low, and then I switched to the high-op 2, which I used to play single and double decks. But I didn't play single and double decks for long, and I went back to the high-low pretty quickly.
Sometimes, so I went back to the knockout. I mean, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to look for when you have an advantage. Well, two things, really. You're trying to find out when to raise your bets, and you're trying to use the index numbers.
Yeah, but all the money is in two things, really. The money is in how much you raise your bet and how good is the penetration. And, that's the index numbers and all that is little of your win rate compared to, the penetration and how big your bet spread was. And in the beginning, your bet spread was so small that, I don't know that you had an edge at all.
Well, I mean, if you don't raise your bets, you probably don't have an edge, right?
Right, and if you're only raising them 1 to 3, which is what it sounded like, you were raising, 1 to 3.
Well, if you have two hands going 1 to 3.
Well, but that's still 1 to 3.
Yeah,
right.
Okay.
I mean, it's 1 to 3 on two hands, but it's the ratio between your big bet and your little bet is only 1 to 3, and on most of the games, here in Las Vegas, I don't know that'd be enough to win.
What do you spread?
Well, I haven't counted cards in years because the edge is too small. I kind of moved on to other things, but I would mostly play shoes and spread 1 to 20 or 1 to 40. But that was back when you could get away with that a lot easier.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very narrow edge. I mean, that's one of the revelations. And, and the other one is it's just a whole lot of work,
Yeah.
A lot of work and a lot of travel.
Yep.
So,
and you weren't, there's one other factor which you didn't really have to suffer too much of, but, once you really start moving up to the point where you're making serious money, you just get thrown out all the time, and your picture gets disseminated everywhere. And
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, all along, I knew I was writing a book. So anytime I took a pretty bad losing session, I thought, well, it's for the book,
Yeah.
This year-long trip was as much about self-discovery as it was about playing blackjack. Are you a different person today than you were before you started this trip? Are there any life lessons you got out of this that apply to your life today at Edmonds and whatever else you do in Long Beach?
Well, I try and keep it on the down low at Edmonds. But actually, Edmonds, we come up here sometimes for a lot of business trips. We used to go to the racetrack and take driving school up there, too. So I've been in and out of Las Vegas, but it's a whole lot more fun when you're playing blackjack to be in Las Vegas. But in terms of self-discovery, it really was more of a revelation than any of the other books that I've written. I kind of saw a whole other side to myself. I thought of myself as really risk-averse and somebody who couldn't learn complicated subjects and somebody who didn't really like the excitement of gambling. And it didn't turn me into a compulsive gambler or really a problem gambler, but I liked doing it, and I was kind of surprised to find that. It would be funny because these trips would almost go through the same cycle every time, which is we come up here, we go up and down, and then sometimes stay down and leave town. And every time I left, I thought, I'm never going to do that again. 3 or 4 days later, you're rested, and it's like, that was kind of a lot of fun. And then you start getting, the free rooms in the mail, and you start looking at your calendar, and before you know it, you're planning another trip. So that really surprised me quite a bit. And I think I learned about learning. That was a really big thing. Was I learned about learning. And here's my takeaway: is that I was a really terrible student, and that's because the public school system decides if you learn these things, you're well educated, and if you do good at them, you're going to be a success. That's the message that they send to kids. That's a message I got. And if you fall outside of that, then it's like you're stupid, or you're a bad student, or whatever, you know. Well, my brain is just wired differently, I think, and it didn't fit the system, you know. And I began to think about everybody around me, and I think we're all kind of put together differently. You know, we process information differently at different speeds. We like different things. Some people even have disabilities like Asperger's syndrome, which is actually very interesting, kind of what's going on in the brain there. And, you know, autism, there's some amazing powers that they have, like Rain Man, going back to Blackjack and so on. So I think that it kind of was a look inside. And I'm 63 now. I wrote the book, or I started writing it when I was turning 60. So I've been kind of working on it for a while, and I thought it would be interesting to get to know myself toward the end of my life. You know, you never stop learning about yourself, and so that was a big bonus to the book.
One thing I have to say is I don't know your publisher, but for anybody out there that is going to write a book that has anything to do with gambling, you must have someone who knows about gambling do a proofread.
Yeah.
Because there are, unfortunately, many kind of just basic errors in the book. Like, just one example is, it says that one number on roulette pays 39-1 instead of 35-1. Or there are those kind of just very simple things that anyone familiar with gambling would just pick up immediately, but most people at publishing houses, most editors, they have no idea, so they don't know.
No, they don't. It's all new to them. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of funny because driving up here, I was thinking, I wonder what Richard and Bob caught in the book. It's funny. I mean, particularly a book like this, there's just so many details in it. Plus, I did so much rewriting where I was moving pieces of the book around all the time. And when I really actually started writing the book, you know, my education level for Blackjack increased enormously. So I kept going back and finding mistakes and trying to correct them and so on.
Sure.
But I apologize to all the gamblers out there for some of the stupid mistakes.
Now, is Bill is Blackjack his full-time profession?
No, he has another job. He's in the financial business.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
According to your website, you at least were playing with the title, with another title other than Wild Cards. You were thinking about a piece of the action, which also sounds like an intriguing title. How did you go back and forth on these two titles? What'd you do here?
I had the worst time trying to find a title for this. And I've got to tell you kind of a funny story. You were talking about penetration earlier. When I first started talking to Bill, he said, you know, one of the most important things in Blackjack is deep penetration, you know. And I thought, wow, that would make a pretty incendiary title for the book.
My wife says the same thing.
Yeah. and so it actually, for a little while, had that title, you know.
Deep penetration?
Yeah. And then somebody said, well, when you go to publicize the book and you say the book's called Deep Penetration and somebody Googles the book, where are they going to wind up? They're not going to wind up on a gambling website, right?
Yeah.
But it worked on so many levels, you know. But so then it was a piece of the action, you know, meaning that I was involved rather than just, sort of a reporter, which I have been. And then my wife, one night, she's very good with titles and things like that. She's a writer, too. One night we're sitting around the dinner table, and she said, well, what about Wild Cards? And we all got kind of quiet, and it's like, yeah, that fits really well. My theory about titles is once a title, the right title comes along, it sticks to the book rather than you trying to stick it onto the book. Because you have to be comfortable saying it out loud, you know, Wild Cards. Piece of the action I just never felt good about, and Deep Penetration made me blush.
Yeah. I would have named it a writer, a priest, and a blackjack player walk into a casino. ...
Well, you know, when I tell people about it's funny when I tell people about it.
That's a good title.
Yeah.
That is a good title.
But I couldn't think of the punchline.
Well, the whole
book. Yeah,
the whole book is a punchline.
The whole book's it's kind of a Shaggy Dog story.
Yeah.
Right? But I did think of some. Okay, so when people hear about it and I say, you know, I wrote this book, I traveled with a professional blackjack player, and, you know, lots of times the priest came along too, and people are like, the priest? And then they start smiling, and it's like, it's not like it's funny or anything, but I guess it's unexpected. So,
I kept waiting for there to be more of the priest in the book, actually.
Yeah.
There's something about that makes you curious. It made me curious.
Right.
I wanted him to get more involved in the story. So for me, that was a little bit disappointing that he wasn't more.
Some of that is because I didn't realize what I had. What a good thing I had, I guess, in a way. But the other thing is that he's just a priest that likes to get away and play video poker. That's kind of his escape hatch. And I was kind of intrigued because I thought, well, why is a priest playing, going to Las Vegas and gambling? So I waited a long time, and then I finally asked him, and he said, the Catholic Church is a lot more liberal about gambling. They play bingo and those things. And he said, as long as you're not gambling with your household budget money, as long as you're not compulsive or addicted, we're not against it,
Yeah, there was a pretty famous blackjack player named Keith Taft who invented the first hidden blackjack computer. And he was a very, very religious guy.
Uh-huh.
And involved in his church, and I remember saying to him, like, how does this work with you and your church? And he said, hey, there's nothing in the Bible that against gambling, So or at least I guess his church didn't feel there was,
Right.
But it was always kind of a weird thing to me,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But, it was good to have Father Andy along, and I was tempted to ask him to pray for us, I joked about it once, and it was funny because he just looked at me, and all of a sudden he got his priest face on, and he said, that's not how it works, and it was like, okay, But we talked about things, and he was a very thoughtful guy, very funny guy. He also is really into sports too, watching hockey and stuff like that. So, here he is, seemingly just sort of like everybody. But if you go to him, I mean, I could totally imagine going to him, with problems, and he would be wonderful, in that way.
Do you intend to continue your blackjack career?
Well, I do enjoy playing. As Richard mentioned, the edge is very small. And, I also don't have a big bankroll. So I guess at this point, I'm definitely, a recreational player. I'm kind of fascinated by it. One of the things that I kind of like about it is I like the way the cards fit together, the system. And when they fit together the way they're supposed to, it's a great feeling.
In other words, when you win.
Yeah, that's another way. It's a shorter way to say it. It's funny because
you feel so smart when the good cards are coming your way, and so stupid when they're not.
Yeah, I know, and and you're totally amazed at the combinations of cards and how they can defy seemingly all kind of logic and mathematical probability. But there they are, And there's something nice about playing a game that exists on the table between two people, at times I've sort of thought, well, maybe I really should go over and play poker, but there's something sort of nice about this idea that you're going to go in there and beat the system, and make a little bit of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a short break now to talk about our sponsors, shorter than usual because this is being taped several weeks before it's being aired, and we don't know exactly what promotions our sponsors are going to have, but we're have more questions for Phillip Reed. South Point will still have 10,000 video poker machines exceeding 99% in December. I'm confident of that. The usual promotion at South Point in December is a half price for almost everything using your points. So if you have the points, however you got them, and you go to any of the restaurants and you use your points, then it's half off. So that's going to be for most of December up until a few days before Christmas. But it includes buying New Year's Eve tickets, assuming you buy them in the right time period. The New Year's Eve concert Bonnie and I are going to be going to is Michael Cavanaugh, who is a Billy Joel impersonator. And so using points, it's quite a bit less expensive if you use your points than if you pay cash.
You need a discretionary comp there.
Oh, I didn't say we were paying for the tickets. No, I'm confident we can get a comp or two. Yeah. But not all of our listeners play enough at the South Point to get comps. But playing enough to get that much in free play to get the tickets would be easy. At the Palms, the first week of December, from actually November 1st, November 30th through December 3rd or 4th, whatever that Friday is, it's going to be free play. So in addition to your 0.25 slot club, you can redeem your points for an additional 0.2 in free play Monday through Friday. So it's like double points for that entire week. Videopoker.com will remain the best place to play. A lot of games for practice. I do not know what their contest will be in the first week of December, so I can't talk about that. All right. So we're talking to Phillip Reed about his book, Wild Cards.
I wanted to ask you about, there was a section in the book where where he started teaching you about index plays.
Yeah.
And you were learning most of the illustrious 18, I think.
Right.
But there was a comment there that where you said something like, he taught me a couple of secrets.
Yeah.
That shall remain secret, or something like that.
Right.
And it seemed to be in a conversation about index plays, which all the index plays are well published. So I was confused over what could be secret about index plays.
Yeah. No, it wasn't about index plays. It was basically about certain card combinations. So that if you see certain combinations, then it actually sort of it's not the same as, you don't literally count them the same way, because there's an increased probability of.
You mean like you have a 3-card 16 against a 10, you don't hit, even if they.
Things
okay,
like
I
that.
get you now. Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were a couple in specific, but at the time it was like, wow, I'm just trying to master this other stuff. So the less things that you're tracking, the better.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really noticed is that in the very beginning, every time I would play, it was like I was looking at the cards through a tunnel. Because you're concentrating so hard and trying to see so much that you can hardly see or hear anything outside. But the better you get, the more you see the big picture, And I think it's really true of any sport. And I tried to approach blackjack as a kind of a combination of a sport and a mental exercise. That the better you get at it, the bigger the picture that you see. And what I found interesting was that if you learn basic strategies so it's completely automatic, then you can go to the next level and learn card counting, and then you can go to the next level and look at the casino around you and make sure that they're not watching you and other things. But you have to layer them on top of each other, was the way that I felt that it worked.
I thought that Bill missed a very important step with you, which whenever I was teaching people, I would take them at that time to the Barbary Coast, but if I were going to do it today, I would take them to the El Cortez.
Yeah.
And I would send them in and say, now this place is great. They have this great single deck game, and you can, spread from like $5 to $50, and
nobody blinks an eye.
And nobody will blink an eye.
And if they're not kicked out in 5 minutes,
and you'll be kicked out in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But it's really important.
It's a rite of passage
to get that first barring under your belt, because people are so afraid of that first barring that once it happens a few times you get used to it.
Yeah. We did go to the El Cortez pretty early on, and I didn't get barred there though. But I completely agree with you. It's a great place to practice.
You must be a really bad player.
To not get barred at the El Cortez is hard.
I know. Yeah.
That's an accomplishment. All right.
Okay. So now another thing. This one almost fell out of my chair, because it sounded like there was this section where Bill told you that when you were losing to switch from 2 hands down to 1 hand because it would change the rotation of the cards.
Yeah.
Which is complete voodoo. I mean...
Well, people are always talking about the rotation of the cards, but yeah.
Well, the civilians are.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So, I mean, did Bill actually think that, or...
You write a book like this, and yeah, I mean, that was my memory, and that's why I put it in. But it doesn't sound like him, because I'm sure if he was here, he would say, "I never said that," or "It's not true." It's not true.
So it's
possible. It's possible that I phrased it wrong, or misunderstood it, because I understand that that's not right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Did he proof the book before you?
Yeah, he read it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So he might have missed that part.
Yeah. Or
Well, it's funny, but because I've gone through this in the past with people that I've written books with, and in a lot of cases, you call them up and say, "Did you read the book?" "Yeah, I read the book." "What do you think?" "Well, there's a typo on page 56." And it's like a 300-page manuscript, and that's what they say. I don't know. People don't process books the same way that a writer does.
Yeah.
I mean, I was looking for serious notes,
right,
and that was not what I got.
Yeah. I found,
but I do want to say, for the record, he wouldn't have said that.
Okay. Yeah. I found that I had to tell people what kind of feedback I was looking for when I would give them something. I would say, if you see typos, great, but what I'm really looking for is, does this flow? Is this clear? And basically I would give them direction, about what kind of notes I wanted.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to go. I mean, to some degree, you're sort of relieved that there's not a lot. I mean, he read the book and he said, "It sounds great." So that's good. I feel that I need to be a really tough critic, but the things you're bringing up, I wish I'd caught them, but I don't think anybody else, will. This is a highly professional, reading here.
Well, that's true, but that's our audience too.
Yeah.
Our I mean, I think our audience is the audience for your book, but they are also the audience that's going to catch a lot of those things.
Yeah. Well, maybe people will buy it so they can poke holes in it, but if they buy it, that's fine.
Yeah, right.
Go ahead and send me all the corrections. I mean, we have an online version as well as the hardcover.
Ah.
So I'm assuming the corrections could be made.
Oh.
It's harder to make the corrections on the hardcover.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, I had somebody go through after my book was published.
Uh-huh.
They went through and redlined stuff and corrected, punctuation errors and all that, and sent it back to the publisher.
Well, I know that if
what did Anthony do when he saw that?
You know what? He actually took it all, and for the second printing, they made a lot of the corrections. I mean,
that's the appropriate thing to do.
It was helpful, yeah.
If there is,
for someone to take the time to do that, though,
Yeah, well, you never know what you're going to get when you ask for feedback.
Yeah.
From people.
Yeah.
If you had to do this journey over again, how would it be different next time?
I think that, I mean, it was a lot longer road than I ever anticipated. So, part of me feels like, I mean, it is what it is. I did it, and I'm really glad that I did it, but I don't think I had any idea what I was undertaking at the time. I have a tendency to jump in and, with both feet. But by the same token, there's a lot of things that just kind of unfold. So I think that I would have stuck with. I did a lot of sort of like fumbling around, playing games that probably weren't worth playing. 6-deck games are really difficult. I wish I had focused more quickly on 2-deck games and focused on one count. And I had to kind of, to some degree, find my own way to learn and what really was working for me. And it took a little experiment, trial and error to do that.
Do you have kids, and have you talked about this with them, or?
Yeah, my kids are a little older. I have 2 sons, and one is a musician, and the other one is probably going to be a writer. He just got out of college. But they both know all about it. Both of them probably would be 100 times better than me at this because, the musician, he studies languages and stuff. My other son does mathematical calculations in his head. They both retain and process information really quickly. So I think in the book I said, that they love me anyways despite my, lesser capabilities.
So they have no interest in learning, or you have no interest in teaching them?
I would love to have them learn. Although I think it might be a little frightening, too, at the same time. Let's face it, first of all, they don't have a bankroll, so that's a big problem. And I told them what I tell a lot of people is that, it's a pretty entertaining hobby. If you're going to sit there and play solitaire, you might as well practice basic strategy, and you can use it when you go to Las Vegas.
Actually, my younger son, who's not 21 yet, he's always on his phone playing. There's this kind of puzzle game called 2048 where it's a grid of numbers and you. Anyway, it's pretty mindless and he's doing it all the time. And so I downloaded a video poker app on his phone and I said, from now on, instead of playing that game, you're learning jacks are better.
Yeah.
So that. I think he's better suited to video poker than blackjack. So I'm pushing him that way. But my other son is playing blackjack.
Yeah,
now,
they don't seem to have any real interest in it. They've both been with me to casinos and watched me play. And they both met Bill too and watched him play. But I think it's just so far beyond their realm of at this point, that they don't seem to be drawn to it.
Very good.
You had a and again, this was another one of those sort of voodoo things, but maybe your attitudes have changed. And that was you had pretty particular feelings about the difference between male and female dealers.
Yeah, well, I tried to go back to the World's Greatest Blackjack book and found it. But I remembered reading about a survey that was done that said that blackjack players won more from women than from men.
Yeah.
But I couldn't go back. I remember reading it, but I couldn't find it. I think I referred to that in the book.
Lance Humble's book, The World's Greatest Blackjack book, the system is good. High opt is good. The numbers are good. But all of his personal stuff in there, is just craziness. I mean, he used to think every time he lost, he got cheated. He thought there was just rampant cheating in it everywhere, which, he was just wrong.
Uh-huh.
I think that I don't think there's any real basis for that.
I do think, though, that one of the things I realized is that, there's certain places, certain casinos I really like. I like to sit in certain places in casinos. I mean, if the dealer is, antagonistic or overly competitive, it doesn't really help me at this point. So
it certainly makes it less pleasant.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
for a very attractive female dealer, do you find yourself getting more distracted with your mind going places it shouldn't, perhaps, rather than not be able to keep track of the count?
Well, in the interest of preserving the marriage that you referred to earlier, I'll say absolutely not.
Uh-huh. All right.
But they have those bikini dealers down there, and those are not tables that I play.
Well, but primarily because the rules on those games are quite a
they're
bit
terrible.
Yeah, usually
because people aren't looking at the rules.
That's right. But they are thinking of penetration.
So,
okay. Richard.
So we welcome your questions. Send them to us at gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com, or you can send them to us at facebook.com/gamblingwithanedge, or you can tweet them at me at RWM21. You can get the show delivered to you automatically at iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or my site, richardmunchkin.com, or...
Thank you, Richard.
You've been listening to Gambling with an Edge with your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin. Subscribe to the show in iTunes, and episodes will be delivered to you automatically every week. Archived versions of past shows may be found at bobdancer.com and richardmunchkin.com. We welcome emails at gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com. Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin are both available on Facebook and welcome your questions. The sponsors for the show are the South Point Hotel, Casino and Spa, the M Resort, the Palms Casino Resort, and the website videopoker.com. Join us again next week for another Gambling with an Edge.